Now we have seen that how did the tribals reacted to the colonial oppression, and how did the tribals reacted to the policies and the ways the Britishers introduced to them. Let's see the story of the Birsa Munda and how the rebel amongst him, and how did the rebellions that he led, uh, made an impact on the colonial history. Let's see what happened in the era of Birsa Munda. Now, rebellion by the tribals. All the tribals, most of them, they were not very happy with the British policies and the rules. They were not very happy with the ways that British was causing them to follow. They were not very happy with the interference in the traditions that the British were doing. They had this certain way of tradition and lifestyle, and they wanted to follow that. They wanted to live their life very freely. They wanted that they should be left alone because they were the natives of the land that they were living in, and there was no need of any interference from any outside power, be it the Britishers, be it the moneylenders, and all the people that they called Dikus. So the calls, basically the rebel amongst them, they started. It started, growing. The rage and the dissent in their mind. It started growing, and it was. It came in the form of revolts. So the Kols rebelled in 1831, followed by Santals in 1855. The Bastars of the Chhattisgarh, today's Chhattisgarh area, they also revolted. So all the tribes, they revolted one by one because of the oppressive laws that were forced upon them by the colonial rule. This is the representation of the Santhal rebellion of in 1855. Now we can see that even in their own ways, like most of the people, they did not have these tribal people, they did not have modern ways of fighting a warfare. They were not used to fighting people. They had a very simple way of living, and see, with the archers and with the swords they are fighting. So most of the people are here are dead. Of course, these pictures, they were painted by the British painters, and we have seen in the previous chapters that how they wanted to made a very glorified impression of the Britishers, and how they wanted to become the majestic persons. So it might be the scene that they also wanted to create an impression that these were weak people, but let's not believe on that, because all these revolts were successful. Eventually, the British, they had to give in to the demands of these tribals. These people are the British. They are using guns and all kinds of things which are killing the people, which are injuring the people who are just fighting with the swords and the archers. So all these people, they came in the revolt. Now let's see what happened and who was Birsa Munda. Now, Birsa Munda, he was born in the Munda tribe, as we have already seen in the first PPT. He was born to a very poor father, and he used to do all the grazing of. He used to make sheep's graze, and he used to do a lot of things. He used to go to the forest and procure the stuff to eat, and he used to also go to the local missionary school, where he used to learn the sermons that were given, and there he had a great impact on his mind. He also was very attached to one of the Vaishnav preachers, who taught him about all the basis of the purity and the deity thing, purity and piety. So he believed greatly that his ancestors, he was taught this by the sermons that were preached in the missionary schools. He was taught that there was a golden age which used to be there before these Dikus came. So before they became they started interfering in the lives of these people. Before that, it was a very, very golden age era where these people, these Munda people and all the tribal people, they lived in a very serene and very peaceful way. They lived in their own way, following their own traditions and cultures, and they had a very good life then. That was called the golden age of the past, where they had no interference from the Dikus, where Dikus had not arrived then. So Birsa, since he had all these sermons attached in his brain and all the preachers of pious and purity attached in his brain, he was very, very impressed by these kinds of sermons, and he believed that golden age could come back if we all practice some sense of uniformity in our ways. So basically, he urged his people to not follow what they have been following, to not drink liquor, or to maintain cleanliness, and to have very faith in Christianity, and to lead a very Christian life. So basically, they all believed that a certain way of living, that this a certain way of having the life that was there in the golden age, by doing those things, we could have the golden age again. The people used to see Birsa as their leader. They used to see Birsa as a god who was sent by them to get rid of the Dikus. So they also respected him a lot. And Birsa also had a belief that he had come to take out the misery of his people by sending out the Dikus by sending Dikus out of their lives. So that is why he urged his followers to recover the golden age, that is the Satyug, the age of the truth, by driving out outsiders like traders, moneylenders, missionaries, and landlords. He was suspicious of all those the things that were trying to shift these people from their own traditional way of living to some other way of living. He was also very suspicious of the Hindu missionaries as well. So basically, all those who come from the outside, who were trying to make them live a certain kind of way, have them preach certain kinds of things, he was very suspicious of all of them. Of course, the Britishers, they were not very sure of his agendas. They thought that the political aspirations of these people, the Birsa being the leader, Birsa being their leader, and them being detached from the outside community, detached from the British lifestyle, detached from the British laws and policies, they could have a separate base, and they could politicize this and make Birsa their leader. They did not wanted that. They wanted to subjugate these people. So in order to do that, they arrested Birsa, and he was kept in jail for 2 years. He was arrested by British in 1895, and then he was arrested on the grounds of riot. Like he was urging the people to create a riot, to create a ruckus. He was arrested on that ground. 2 years later, he was released. What happened after he released? So before we learn the significance of the movement, when Birsa was released, he then mobilized the people into coming together and revolt against the practices of the Britishers. He urged them to bring that golden era back. He urged them to live a certain kind of way, like he was urging people. He went from places to places, learning about the circumstances and making them learn that what kind of behavior would help them get rid of these Dikus. So these people, they also heard to him in a very, very responsive way. They also believed that a revolt could, lead them to their golden age, back to their golden age. Of course, Birsa died a very painful death. He died of cholera. A few years later. But what he did for these tribal people granted them a new kind of hope, a new kind of motivation for them to have their golden age back. Birsa, although he died, but he gave lives back to these people. So that is the contribution of the Birsa Munda. This movement had a huge significance on the lives of both the colonial people and the tribals. How it was of significance in two ways. How we can see. First of all, it gave tribals the motivation. It made them believe that if they revolt properly, if they have faith in themselves, if they mobilize themselves and work in uniformity, they could make these people go out of their lives. They could make these Dikus go out of their lives. They also forced the colonial government to introduce laws to protect the lands of the tribal from Dikus. That is the outsiders. Outsiders were considered, the Britishers were also considered as outsiders, but here I think Dikus meant the moneylenders, the traders, and all the people who were forcing certain kind of lifestyle on these people. So they made these colonial leaders to introduce laws for safeguarding their interest. So that was a huge step, and that is one of the significance of the movement. It also showed the tribal people, as I just said, that they had the capacity to protest against this injustice, this exploitation, this kind of coerciveness that the Britishers were indulging upon. So that was the significance of the movement. That is how our tribals lived. We still have tribals amongst us, and we have given them the protection. Now also we have a separate law for them. We have a lot of things we are doing to safeguarding all kinds of traditions that they are practicing. Let's move on to the questions of these chapters. Question 1 is fill in the blanks. The method of sowing seeds in jhum cultivation is known as, this is known as broadcast. The method of sowing seed in jhum cultivation is known as broadcast. That is scattering the seeds just like that and not plowing them. So here we can write broadcast. The tribal chiefs got land titles. They were allowed to have their land titles under the British land settlement. Of course, their administrative role was snatched. Tribals went to work in the tea plantations of Assam, tea and coffee plantations of Assam, and mines in Bihar. The British described the tribal people as uncivilized. Uncivilized, or you may have some other answer. There's no fixed answer to that. I suggest you to explore whatever answer that you might want to write in this section. The question 2 is state whether true or false. Cocoons were bought from the Santals and sold by the traders at 5 times the purchase price. True, 4 to 5 times of the purchase price. These cocoons were brought from Santals and sold by the traders. It wasn't sold by the traders. Yes, sorry, I mistakenly said it was sent by these traders. They sent their agents to buy the cocoons from the Santals, and these were sold by the traders at the price which was 4 to 5 times greater than the purchase of price. Birsa urged his followers to purify themselves, give up drinking liquor, and stop believing in witchcraft and sorcery. True, because he thought that only could bring the golden age that they had in the past. Jhum cultivators plow the land and sow the seeds. No, this is false. They used the broadcasting method. They just scattered the seeds on the land that they had just filled the ashes with, and they did not have any methods of plowing or sowing the seeds. The British wanted to preserve the tribal way of life. False. They did everything they could in their power to make the tribals' life civilized in their sense of way. So they wanted to make them settled and gain continuous revenue from them. So this is also false. Let's move on. Question 3 is what problems did shifting cultivators face under the British rule? The shifting cultivators, first of all, they were not very what can I say? They were not familiar with the ways that the British were trying to introduce. They were not familiar with the settling kind of cultivation because they always lived in the foothills and they thought that it was the best way of life for them. So they were not familiar with the way and they protested against that. Of course, in the foothills of the mountains, you cannot have that kind of settled cultivation because the water is always flowing and you could not find a dry land. So that cannot happen in the foothills, and that is why the people, they protested that we cannot do this kind of thing because we have always been practicing the shifting cultivation, and that is what is possible in the mountains, in the foothills of the area. That is what we are familiar with, and that is the only thing which we can do. So that are the problems the shifting cultivators faced. They were also supposed to give a fixed kind of revenue from that farming, but they could not produce, they could not generate that kind of produce from that settled cultivation. That is why they could not even have that revenue. They revolted against that and they succeeded in the revolt. Question 4 is how did the powers of the tribal chiefs change under the colonial rule? So the tribal chiefs, they were allowed to have their land titles with them, but they were stripped of their administrative powers. That is, now they were supposed to give a certain amount of revenue to the Britishers, and they were supposed to live the way that the Britishers prescribed them. That is a disciplined, their own kind of disciplined way, and all kinds of authority that the tribal chiefs used to had over their people, that abolished because the Britishers, they were enforcing their kind of authority over these people. So they lost all their administrative powers under the colonial rule. Question 5 is what accounts for the anger of tribal against the Dikus? The Dikus, that is, I'm including the moneylenders, the traders, and all the missionaries and even the Britishers as Dikus here. So you might want to classify who you want to consider as Dikus. Basically, for the tribals, all the outsiders people, all the outsiders who were forcing them to live a certain kind of life were Dikus. So the Dikus, they forced the tribals to live a certain kind of way. The moneylenders, they used to scam them with the loans, and they used to take huge interest from them. So that were the problems that caused anger. The traders, they used to gain a lot of profits from what these people used to produce, like we have seen in the example of Santhal. So they also felt cheated. So that was another thing. The Britishers, when they came, they tried to impose their kind of living into these people. They tried to enforce their kind of discipline. They tried to settle them. They tried to make them more that kind of subjects which could be subjugated by the British colonial rule. So that also angered them. Their way of living was totally challenged. Their traditional ways, their culture was challenged by all these Dikus, and that is what angered them the most. That they were not able to regain what they had been practicing over a long period of time. Question 6 is, what was Birsa's vision of golden age? Why do you think such a vision appealed to the people of the region? The Birsa's vision of golden age was what was there before the Dikus came in their land. So basically, before the Dikus came, there was a golden age which prevailed, which in which the Munda community, they lived in a very peaceful manner, following their own tradition and culture, living a very peaceful and happy life. That golden age was suddenly interrupted when these Dikus came and started exploiting these people there, and they started imposing and causing them into certain way of lifestyle. And such vision of Birsa, that if people started to practice a disciplined way of having pious and peaceful method, and having very pious means living with cleanliness, and stop drinking liquor, and have a very faithful way towards the Christianity, have a very different kind of life, he believed that we could still grow towards our golden age. And this kind of thought, it made the people to believe in Birsa, because they were tired of the oppression, they were tired of the exploitation and subjugation of the colonial rule on them, and then they wanted to have their old glory back. So that is why they believed in Birsa and his ideals, and they believed that the golden age could come back. Question 7 is, find out from your parents, friends or teachers the names of some heroes of the other tribal revolts in the 20th century. Write their story in your own words. Some of the other leaders apart from Birsa Munda was, for instance, number first, you could find about these leaders. I'm just stating the names. You can find about the history of these leaders. Were Guru Govind, who led the Bhil revolt in 1913. The second was Aluri Sitaram Raju, who led the revolt of the Koya community in Andhra Pradesh. The third was Lakshman Nayak, who led the revolt against British in Koraput, Odisha. Now, all these leaders, they mobilized the people into believing that they could regain their traditional ways of life if they followed certain kind of rules, and they led these revolts in their areas, and they were successful because the British had to formulate laws and policies according to the means and methods of these people, the livelihood of these people. Question 8 is, choose any tribal group living in India today. Find out about their customs and way of life, and how their lives have changed in the last 50 years. So let's take Munda tribe for example. We have seen the life of the Birsa Munda. Now, Munda tribe is still very famous in the Jharkhand region. Jharkhand was segregated from Bihar in the year 2000. 58%, more than 58% of the people living there are tribals, and a lot of people now are giving a way to the modern life into their traditional way. So basically, they have their own language, they have their own linguistic thing, but they are also changing their ways of life. So we have seen an example of Arjun Munda. If you are all aware with the Arjun Munda, he was the chief minister of Jharkhand for 2 terms, that is for 10 years. He was also from the Munda tribe. So these Munda tribe, they are more, they're going towards literacy and education. 58% of the Munda tribes males are educated, and 38% of the females are educated. These are also, coming on to the various ways of life, such as politics. They're also engaged in politics for a long instance. They also have some of their seats reserved for, advancement of them in all the areas of life. So basically, they are not holding themselves back. They are not practicing, apart from practicing their old traditional ways, they are also accepting the modern ways and trying to indulge and mix in the society. We have Scheduled Tribe and Scheduled Caste Act, and these act also give certain rights to these people. We also have various reservation policies for all these people across the India, to help them promote, to help them be on the same level as that of other peoples. So that is how their life has changed in the last 50 years. After independence, they have seen a lot of laws working for their advantage. The Indian government, the Indian constitution, they have tried to, retain their way of livelihood. They are free to live their own kind of life in their own traditional way, but they are also being welcomed in the other community. Of course, we still have a lot of gap to fill. Like recently, not recently, 5 or 6 years back, I came across a news that was of Bastar community, which is a tribal group living in Chhattisgarh. One of the females was raped, and they did not have any communication method to communicate with the judges of the High Court. So basically, that shows us that some of these people who are still, being exploited by some of the other people, like these people, they were allegedly raped by the police, by the forest police. So these kind of allegations, they still make us think that what are the things that we are doing towards these people, and are they still in danger? So we'll hope that we'll find about this. Let's have a quick revision of the chapter. Tribal groups were mainly Jhum cultivators, hunter-gatherers, animal herders, or settled cultivators. We have Jhum cultivators as shifting cultivation, the slash and burn. Hunter, we still have this in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh and many areas of Northeast. We have hunter and gatherers. We see these kind of tribals very less now. We have animal herders and settled cultivators. The British wanted tribal groups to settle down as it was easier to control and administer settled peasants. Of course, you cannot administer and control those people who are always on the move. So basically, they wanted them to settle down so that they could administer these people in a more subtle way. Forest laws restricted the tribal movements, lifestyles, and livelihood significantly, because most of these tribals, they depended very closely and for most of their things to the forest. And because of the reserved forest laws, it affected their lives in a very bad sense, and they revolted against it, and they were successful. Birsa Munda's movement aimed to drive out moneylenders, landlords, and British officials from the tribal lands. Of course, they also thought that they will see a golden age where there could be no Dikus and their interference in their traditional way of living. These movements forced the British to introduce laws protecting tribal rights over the lands. So basically, the British had to step down here, and the colonial power had to introduce laws to protect the interest of these tribals as well, because they were now of the thought that they are not timid. They could not be, made to live certain kind of life if they don't want to. So basically, that's what happened. Let's hope we find out all the answers of the questions that you also need to research about, and it'll increase our understanding of the today's condition of the tribal people. Now let's find out how the tribal people today are living, and what are the laws we are having to protect their interest. What are the things that we are giving them to motivate them? What are the things that they're expecting of us, and are we becoming Dikus? Let's hope not. So it was nice having this chapter. It was a very nice chapter. Hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you liked the video. Thank you.